This podcast is brought to you by Bonus Room Productions, and we own this town.
I am Jason T. Mears, Esquire.
And I'm Kelly Hoyle Bullock.
And we are
Dimas Today.
How's it going, Kelly?
Oh, man. It feels like it's been forever since I've seen you.
I know. It's been hours. And I got to say something before we move on. As a member of the club, welcome to 40, man.
Oh, thank you. All right. So you gave it away.
I did.
I ran off to New Orleans and decided to turn 40.
Yeah, and you survived.
I did.
You lived to tell the tale.
It was blast. I might have time traveled in a phone booth down there.
That's amazing. That is amazing. Yeah, I'm sorry I couldn't be there, but you know.
That's all right. It's all right. You had a bit of a staycation yourself.
I did. I stayed. I caved. Went into a cave and came out. I emerged.
That's awesome.
Yes.
All right. So here we are. San Dimas today.
What are we going to talk about today? Bill and Ted? Are we going to talk about some Bill and Ted today?
I think so. So, we made that executive decision that we're going to really pay our tribute to the personages of historical significance.
Oh, man. I've been looking forward to this episode since we decided to do this podcast. This is going to be so much fun.
Do we just throw it out there? The bread and butter at the end of this episode. When you get there, you're going to hear an interview with Napoleon himself, actor Terry Camilleri.
This guy was just a pleasure to talk to, had so much insight in the filming and the process, and just how the character of Napoleon really grew thanks to his involvement. It could have been a completely different movie if they hadn't had Terry.
Definitely.
This was a real treat and something I wasn't sure we'd ever really get to experience on this podcast, but getting to talk to a guy who had personal experience working with George Carlin.
Yeah.
How cool was that?
I know. Spoiler alert.
Sorry, don't want to give anything away.
All right, so let's just start with a little setup here. We're honing in here on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the first movie, and as most of you know, they have the setup where Rufus goes back in time, deliver these guys a time traveling phone booth, so they can finish their history report. He gives them what would we call it? A little demo, a little trial run, if you will.
Absolutely, it's like the 7-day. Trial period of any of your streaming services. Here you go, guys. Let's go check out France and see what's going on.
Yeah. Let's drop into France in the middle of a battle.
Right, and I believe the footage they used for that battle was footage from a War and Peace.
Like some stock footage?
Yeah, stock footage from a War and Peace TV movie or something.
So awesome.
If you check the credits, I think they show that's what they used for some of that bigger stuff, which is just fantastic.
It's great. So they're in Austria and they're outside the phone booth, and they look across the field, and who should be standing there but Napoleon?
Yeah.
I think my favorite shot there is when Napoleon's looking through his telescope and they wave at him.
But I mean, why would you not wave to him? They're like, "Hey,
how's it going?" So good.
It's just great. And then he's like, "Blow them up," and instead he gets blown up himself. And as they leave, he gets sucked into the circuits of time. And
takes the wildest ride through the circuits of time.
And then what's cool is in Bogus Journey, they follow that up because that's obviously possible, right?
Right.
Rufus does the same thing to escape Dinos. Mm-hmm. So cool how they write that in.
Yeah, it's nice.
We can talk about Napoleon a little bit more at the end, but let's run through some of these other...
Right. Okay, so, we'll fast forward a little bit in the movie. Okay, so they've been left on their own by Rufus. Mm-hmm. And... first place they go to is the Old West.
Fantastic little scene, them walking into the bar. Mm-hmm. They order some beers. Yeah. 2 beers.
Dude, he didn't even card me.
I know, we're going to have to remember this place. Just wonderful. Then they get sucked into a cheating scheme with none other than Billy the Kid.
Billy the Kid. And, I enjoy history, and I consider myself somewhat of an Old West buff. And I'd say there were some differences between the real Billy the Kid and then our boy Dan Shore's Billy the Kid.
I don't know. I tend to disagree. What I know of history, I learned from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, so I think probably they nailed it.
So, he walks in, yeah, right, and he's looking tough, intimidating, he's like, needs to put together a team to play poker, right?
Yeah.
And he hires Bill and Ted.
Hires a strong word. It's more like intimidate. Oh, dude. When did this movie come out compared to Young Guns?
Ooh, That's a good question.
Because Billy the Kid was definitely having a moment there.
Yeah,
the
I feel
mid-
like
late
Young
80s.
Guns was probably 86. It's got to be close.
Right?
Should have probably looked that up,
Yeah,
huh?
I don't know. Off the cuff. But it was around the same time.
Yeah.
So if you're going to compare Emilio Estevez to Dan Shore,
There we go. I mean, that.
I think Dan Shore nailed it. No offense to Mr. Estevez.
Well, I will say this is that it starts off intimidating, but then they're playing the game, right?
Yep.
And then the other guys at the table realize that they're being cheated, and then Billy turns into a total wimp.
Yeah.
He's just like, gulp. Real Billy the Kid would have killed everyone.
Yeah, maybe.
Bill and
maybe.
Ted included.
But he didn't. He didn't. And
He saw something in those 80s clothes those guys were wearing, right?
Yeah, and he's like, I can get into this. And I like how Billy the Kid kind of becomes the unofficial den mother of the phone booth.
Yeah.
He's the personage of historical importance that takes all the others under their wing. And he's kind of like, all right, Bill and Ted are in charge, but I'm going to help everybody else out. He's like come on, guys, let's go. Let's get together. And he's helping out. It's really kind of neat.
No, I know. So after they pick up Socrates, a.k.a. Socrates.
Yes.
And then they make it to medieval England. They step out of the booth, and we've talked about it before. It's just some of the best, and I have to hope this was like somewhat improv to a degree. You'd have to think or maybe somebody's like, here, let's get this Nerf football in there somehow,
Right?
And if you're paying attention at all in the background while they're ogling over the castle and the princesses, you see Billy the Kid and Socrates start playing football together. It's fantastic.
Apex of Western civilization, all of cinema right there. That is the greatest moment. And
Yeah, and then they take the buddy thing to the next level with the rescue.
yes,
Oh, man.
it's just fantastic. And, if it was improvised, that's genius. But if it was also scripted as something going on in the background, that's also genius.
Yep.
Either way, you don't lose it. You can't take anything away from anybody for coming up with that idea and executing it so well.
Completely agree. And so, you have, the first three folks that are introduced, Napoleon, Billy the Kid, Socrates. Most of the screen time is with these three, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Everybody else kind of comes into play in that montage, right?
Right.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially when Joan of Arc gets picked up. The Go-Go's Jane Weedland, primary songwriter, rhythm guitarist.
Amazing musician, amazing artist. Perfect casting.
She has probably the most impressive credentials on IMDb because she has, characters that she's actually played, then herself in a million things, then the music she's composed.
And it's just so cool that it worked out so well for her to be in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure with all the other musician cameos and appearances. That's just like chocolate and peanut butter right there. Getting her in that role, it's perfect.
All right, so we've got the montages going on. We're picking up people left and right. We get Genghis Khan,
Yes.
Al Lung, Hollywood stuntman.
Oh man, and Die Hard, right? So he's the first Die Hard universe connection that we have with the Bill and Ted universe. We've got another one that we'll talk about later, which if you're paying attention at home, you already know is William Sadler. And also we've got Chuck Denomalos, who was in Lethal Weapon 2, and also Al Leong was in Lethal Weapon 1. Not Lethal Weapon 2, but Lethal Weapon 1.
Okay.
Cool. I mean, it had to be a little weird. I'd love to talk to that guy and see what it was like to be, one, transition from what it was like to be a stuntman in the 80s, to two, to transition to being like, I hate to say it, but token, Asian bad guy.
Right. And that's one of the things with Excellent Adventure with the montage characters who don't get a lot of screen time. They're obviously going to be the most one-dimensional.
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, Genghis Khan, want a Twinkie, Genghis Khan,
Right. Yeah.
like he basically grunted, I think. I don't think he spoke any dialogue.
Right. Yeah. He, during the big history presentation, he basically demonstrated martial arts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So no real insights into what he thought of modern day San Dimas. But,
Right. What better way to tie all that together than with that history report scene?
Just perfect.
That kind of leads me to, Robert Barron, right? I mean, Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, that guy. And you talk about somebody introduced in the montage, which he absolutely was. Easy for an American audience to recognize him iconically.
Right.
Just super easy.
We talked about that level of White House security that was happening there.
Right.
When he got snatched.
Yep.
Andy Graham. Who could it be?
Right, exactly. Not what's a candygram. But anyway, he is probably, out of the montage characters, the guy that gets the most lines.
Yeah, you're right.
In the police station, he goes through the booking process and getting interviewed, and
At the mall.
Yeah, at the mall.
I'm Abraham Lincoln. That's so good.
Yes, yeah. Fantastic. And then, of course, he gives the iconic speech at the presentation. That's maybe the second most quoted line. I think the most quoted line from the movies is, San Dimas High School football rules.
Yeah, maybe.
And then after that is Lincoln's delivery of be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes.
That was very good.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I haven't practiced that like a billion times.
Yeah, I was gonna say probably after that, strange things are afoot at the Circle K.
Yeah, that's a good
Still
one.
hear that a lot,
Yep.
All right, and so we don't want to leave anyone out here. You obviously you have Freud, played by the great Rod Loomis, who was King Zed in Beastmaster.
My strongest memories of Beastmaster were being a very young boy and my parents having a satellite dish and that movie coming on in pretty heavy rotation. That being probably my first experience of seeing like boobs in movies.
Nudity?
Nudity in movies.
It was a European vacation for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Glad we could share that with each other.
I'm just saying, if we can't share that with each other, who can we share that with?
Beethoven?
Beethoven? Yeah. I mean, great little musical interlude there. I assume composed by a friend of the show, David Newman.
Probably right. Yep. And then they kind of bleed into the Extreme song there in that montage, right?
Oh, yeah.
The da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's actually, Nino Betancourt's guitar.
Yep.
But they kind of make it look like Beethoven's playing it.
And if anybody could, it'd be
him. Yeah. And maybe I've not looked into this. I don't know if maybe that's like a Beethoven piece that Nino Betancourt's playing. I only could hope that that's true.
I'm going to hope it's true for your sake.
Yeah, that's right. Do we need to do a fact checker segment on the following episode?
I don't think we do, because we're talking about Bill and Ted. And, if anybody wants to fact check Bill and Ted, I just think they're missing the point.
That's right.
Yeah.
We'll time travel later. Correct it.
If you look through their IMDb pages, it's really cool to see. It's a snapshot of what was going on for like not your big time Hollywood players, kind of like the industry guys that were grinding it out, doing work as they could on network TV. So many of these guys were on. You were saying the Equalizer together, or not together, but on Equalizer,
doing similar bit roles for all these different shows and things that were going on.
Right. A couple of them were on Battlestar Galactica, which post-dated, but it's interesting to see these folks pop up there.
Next Generation episodes.
There's a lot of Next Generation.
I was thinking the other day about, maybe some missed opportunities between Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. The heaven scene would have been a great moment to maybe tie back in some of these guys, like bring Socrates back.
Who knows how easy it would be? I mean, it's simple for you and I sitting here in a studio recording a podcast. To say, oh, that would have been easy to have. But I guess the problem you get into there is, well, did that person deserve to get into heaven, or with that person? Because Bill and Ted ethos, all these folks get into heaven regardless. I think
for sure.
Yeah, it's not like they're time traveling.
Okay, maybe not Genghis Khan.
You don't know.
I don't know.
But at one point in the script, Hitler was going to be traveling with them. So Hitler probably is not getting into heaven. So I could understand him not being there. But if you were making, get Abraham Lincoln into heaven at least,
Yeah, he could use a break,
Yeah, absolutely.
That poor guy.
Maybe it was the fact that the cost of recreating that top hat in white was too expensive and prohibitive. That's probably the only reason that didn't happen.
We didn't get a chance to ask Chris Matheson what inspired Heaven or how that got added into the script. Maybe it wasn't always there,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting that Hal Landon Jr.'s father shows up as one of the historical figures in heaven.
Oh,
Hal
okay.
Landon Sr., I think he might have played Benjamin Franklin.
Nice. All right, so let's get back into, the main event here, Napoleon, the person of historical significance with the greatest amount of screen time.
Carried a third of the movie.
Right.
This film would have looked completely different without his involvement.
Terry Camilleri was so gracious to speak with us. Fantastic actor. As we talk about in the interview, he worked with other great directors like Peter Weir. My only regret is we didn't have a longer interview,
I know.
He was so great to talk with. And seems like he'd be a really good drinking buddy too,
Yeah.
Like I would like to have a glass of some good whiskey with this guy.
I would have a glass of bad whiskey with that guy.
In a plastic cup.
Don't care. It was a lot of fun, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy this.
All right, here's our interview with Terry Camilleri.
Excellent!
Terry, thank you so much for joining us today. Let's get to it. How did you get into acting?
Firstly, it's my pleasure. I got into acting, I first wanted to get into acting when I was 8 years old. My dad used to take us to the drive-in on a Friday night, and I really got engrossed in the movies. And then one day I noticed that I saw the same people in a different film. I kind of went, I'd like to do that, because I had a very strong imagination when I was young, and I told my dad, I said, that's what I want to do when I grow up, and that's what I ended up doing. But I didn't start until I was 20. Before that, I was a lead guitarist in a rock band for quite a while.
Oh, wow. So I'm a guitar player as well. Do you still play?
I've picked it up again in the past couple of years. While I was in LA, I got this really nice Big Apple 1978 Big Apple Strat, and I've been playing that a bit. I've been jamming with some of the old guys back here in Melbourne that I used to play with.
The Stratocaster is my bread and butter, my friend.
Yeah, this is a real beauty.
So, when you got into acting, one of the great things I've noticed, looking up the roles you've played, is that your first role was in Peter Weir's first movie,
Yeah.
Cars That Ate Paris. How did you get involved working with Peter?
He was working for the Commonwealth Film Unit in Sydney at the time, and I went there to audition for an anti-drug film called Drugs and the Law with a director by the name of Keith Gow. I did an improvised screen test, and Keith was pretty impressed with that, so he showed it to Peter, and Peter wanted to meet me, and so I met with Peter, and he told me about this film that he was going to direct with, actually it was a vampire film at the time, with John Farnham, who was a well-known pop singer in Australia, and Olivia Newton-John. John playing the rock singer and Olivia playing the vampire, and I was going to play his manager. And then he said he'd let me know when that was going to happen. So time went by and nothing really, I didn't hear anything, and I did Drugs and the Law. And then I got, I was asked to join the tour of Disney on Parade in Europe because I'd already done the Australian tour. And so I decided to do that for, 10 months. Then Peter called me again and called me in there, and he said, listen, the vampire film wasn't happening anymore. I said, okay, that's okay. I've worked out other plans anyway. He said, but I'm doing this other film called The Cars That Ate Paris, and I'd like you to play the lead role. And I said, and we talked about it and the story, and I really liked it. And I said, when are you going to do it? He said, well, we're going to do it in about 6 months. I said, well, I'm leaving next week for Europe for 10 months. And he said, well, we'll wait for you.
So did you and Peter then keep in touch? Because I saw that later on you were also in The Truman Show.
Yeah, we kept in touch. I have the utmost respect for Peter. I did another thing with Peter after Cars That Ate Paris, a mini-series being done by the ABC here in Australia and BBC in America, called Luke's Kingdom. It was like a mini-series of an old Australian Western. And I did an episode of that, and it was a 4-part thing. I did one of them that Peter was directing, and then I did Truman Show with Peter. I was in Los Angeles, and he called me at the time for Truman Show, and he said, listen, I've got this part. It isn't a huge part, but I'd really like you to look at it. So he sent me the script, and I called him back, and I said, of course I'll do it. It's a great script, you know. So.
And I've got to say, like, that is one of the most memorable images from the Truman Show. That you know, the small screen time you have. When I think Truman Show, I think of you sitting in that bathtub.
Yeah.
It's just striking. You know, it's perfect, and you are the perfect man for it.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. I mean, the relationship I've got with Peter is really special. I think it's really good because he trusts his actors, and you talk with him, you know, and you work with him. You don't work for him. And a week before we shot it, I'd read the script, and I went and saw him, and I said, listen, I'm going to be in the bathtub, just me watching television, right? He said, yeah. I said, would it be okay if I had some toys in there and the phone and magazines and things like that? He said, yeah, absolutely. He said, but the only thing you can't have is a rubber duck. I said, okay, no worries. And I think that helped to solidify the character.
So it appears like you were doing a lot of work in Australia. Was there a point where you said, okay, I'm going to go to L.A. and try and be based out of L.A., or was that selective? How did that work?
Well, I'd done a number of films in Australia, and I decided I needed to kind of get to know myself a bit more. So I grabbed a backpack and I went to Bali and then went overland through Indonesia and Malaysia and Thailand and Sri Lanka and India for almost a year. And then I ended up in Europe, where I stayed in Malta for a bit, then in Paris, and then I settled in London, in Camden Town, and I did some work there. And then I was asked to do a bit on Superman 3 by Richard Lester. And so I did that, and then from there I went down to Los Angeles and stayed, got an agent, and formed a theatre group with some very good friends of mine. One that I'd met in London, an actor that came out of Carnegie Mellon, and I shared a house with his two friends. One was a writer and one was a director. They all out of Carnegie Mellon. We started this theatre group.
So that's very cool. You know, so $1 million question here. You know, how did you get involved with auditioning for Bill and Ted?
By my agent, and I went in there, and it wasn't really an audition as such. It was a meeting, because in the actual original script there was no dialogue for Napoleon.
Really?
So there was nothing. All of that, a lot of what you see was improvised, and all that dialogue was made up in the moment. So I met with Stephen Herrick, and wonderful man, and we had a talk, and from that I got the part.
That's amazing. Did you realize how much of the film you'd be carrying when you when you first read the script or looked at the part of Napoleon? Because you were essentially the entirety of the B plot of that film.
Yeah, no, I didn't. No, I didn't. Because there was no dialogue, and there were a lot of the things were added, like the slide down the bowling alley, and
it's iconic. That was such an iconic scene.
Yeah, I wanted to get that whole Napoleon's hand in his jacket thing, but I didn't want to do it the traditional way. So I felt that if I hurt my hand and I had to put it in there to, you know, I thought that might do it, you know, and it kind of worked.
So take us through shooting the water park scene. I mean, that looked like it had to be absolute fun. I don't know if you actually loved water slides or not.
It was the greatest fun. I had a ball there, and I just did what I did, you know. I mean, I went down the chute with the cameraman. He was in front of me, and I'm holding the camera with him, and then I let go, and we just did what we did. It was not really worked out. There was a girl in the way at one stage. I picked her up and put her down, but it all worked so well. It was a lot of fun. It took 2 days to shoot, and it was just a lot of fun.
It looks like it was a ball, and actually to see that sequence, that montage with Napoleon at Waterloo, you can see the transformation from him just being an angry, egotistical curmudgeon to actually finding his inner child and learning to enjoy himself a little bit. It's just great.
Yeah, it was good. It was like, actually, it was interesting because it was like coming through the womb and being reborn in a way. Mm-hmm. And because I realized, before I did the film, I went, oh, shit, Napoleon. How much research do I have to do here? I really got to work. And once I got on the set, I went, wait a minute. He's a duck out of water. He's not in his normal environment. He's free to do anything he likes. And that's where I went with him. And it worked.
That's so great. I mean, I think that's what made it so great is that we got to get one of these characters from the past and see what the day-to-day life would be like throwing them into the, mid-'80s.
Oh yeah, especially the double date with the young teenagers. It's just
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
Okay, how about the history report finale? How long was that? Were all of you on that set for a day or two, or was it just...
What set was this?
This was the high school gymnasium when the guys are giving their final history report?
Oh, that was originally first shot in a classroom. And then, as we kept on shooting the film, I mean, the energy just built up and people started to realize, oh, God, we've got something here. It created its own energy. And so they decided to make a bigger thing of that report scene and brought in a rock lighting man to come in and did the whole trip. And that worked so well.
Was there anything you can recall that you filmed that maybe didn't make it in?
No, everything. In fact, the best compliment I have ever had in my career didn't come to me directly. It was my agent at the time went to this party, and the editor for Bill and Ted was there, and he had a talk. He talked to him about the film and how it was going, and he said it's going great. He said it's amazing. He said we've got this one character that we're using every bit of footage we've got of him, and if he had more, we'd use it. And he said, who was that? He said, it's Napoleon. He said, we're just having such a ball with that. And for me, that is the best crit that I've ever had,
We actually interviewed Chris Matheson the other week, and he had talked about comedy at that time. There really wasn't a whole lot of improvisation that was done at the time. It's more of common now. But, it sounds like you were a bit of a trailblazer, especially on that set.
Right. Yeah, you look at the history of comedies and how improv has been more pervasive in modern-day comedies, and the fact that you and Alex Winter were both, able to improvise and add stuff to an actual Hollywood script at that point is pretty impressive.
Right. Well, thanks to Stephen Herrick, because, he came from an editor's background. I came up with something and he said, all right, try it. And then he said to me after that, he said, listen, anything come up, you feel like doing it, just do it. It worked perfectly, And the only other person I've worked with that's like that was Peter Weir. So it was really, it became really easy to do and a lot of fun. So a lot of pressure was taken away. I was kind of allowed to just be,
Is there anything else from the movie that you can think of that, maybe we should be asking about or you're regretting that we haven't asked about?
I'd just like to say I had the greatest time with George Carlin. We did a lot of shtick and improvisation and on our own, just messing around, in the makeup van or whatever, or wardrobe. But he was such a beautiful person, and I miss him dearly. And he was, he's going to be missed in the next film. I don't know what's happening with that, but
yeah,
we'll
I've read that that's going to be one of the most emotional scenes from the next film. They have mentioned that, so it does seem hard to imagine them doing it without Mr. Carlin, but with your interactions, was he happy to be there? Was he like, did he think it was a fun project, or was it just kind of?
Yeah. He was having a great time.
That's fantastic to hear.
He was having a great time. We were laughing a lot. I mean, it was great. Everything about it. It was just easy. It was just an easy film to work on, because everyone was having a good time, enjoying themselves, and really into what was going on. So
So what have you been up to recently, acting wise?
I've been doing since then. I've done quite a bit, but back in Australia, I did a film which did really well last year called Oddball. It was about a true story about a chicken farmer that had he had these organic chicken farm, and the foxes were killing his chickens. So he went to Italy and got these dogs, these Miramar dogs, I think they're called, and they protected the chickens from the foxes. But in Warrnambool, where the film was shot, there's a little island where fairy penguins would come in, and the foxes were killing them. They would come in to breed, and the foxes were killing them. When the tide was out, they would go over. So this guy decided to put one of his dogs on there to see if it could protect it, and it did. So a producer heard about this and had a script written, and they wrote a script, and it was a huge hit. And I played the judge, who was really angry with the dog, because the dog was a troublemaker and in the town, but he was also the hero. He ended up being the hero. And I did another film after that called The Death and Life of Otto Bloom, a wonderful script. It's about a guy that doesn't remember the past but remembers the future. And I don't play that character. There were 4 characters that are interviewed, and through their stories, the whole story comes out, and I played one of those. And that was a really good script and a really good film to work on.
That sounds really neat. I'm a huge Longmire fan, and was happy to see you show up in a couple of those episodes.
Yeah. I originally worked with Robert Taylor, who plays Longmire, on a film called Coffin Rock, a thriller that was shot in Adelaide, in Australia. And I did that film with him, and we knew each other before, but we became really good friends on that. And then he asked me if I'd come and do something on Longmire, so I did, and I had the greatest time. Listen, that was one of the greatest crews I've ever worked with, the greatest group of actors. It was just a wonderful time, and I spent a lot, even seasons when I wasn't working on it, I was there, because I was in the States at the time, and I'd go and visit Rob, and but they were just a great group of people.
Oh, that's fantastic. That was such a good show, top to bottom. I was glad to see Netflix pick that back up and let them finish that out properly.
Yeah.
Terry, thank you so much for your time. This has been a real honor. Kelly and I have been texting each other back and forth all week. Oh my goodness, we're getting to interview Terry Camilleri. It's really is an honor for us, and thank you so much for your patience and making yourself available to talk to a couple of just big fans. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Terry.
My pleasure, and I just wish them the best for the next Bill and Ted. I think it'll be a good one.
All right, and that was our interview with Terry.
Amazing.
So cool. Him, as you alluded to earlier, him talking about working with George Carlin, it was just gold.
Yeah.
The idea of the two of them in like a makeup room, horsing around, just beautiful.
I loved hearing about shooting the montage at Waterloo.
Yeah.
That was so much fun.
Like you want it to be as fun as it looks, and then you find out it was just as fun.
Yes. Yeah.
And his analogy of Napoleon going through the wormhole, coming out the other end. I mean, so perfect.
Just great. I spent way too long thanking Terry for his time, but I want to thank him again because it's pretty epic. I think we got a lot of insight that I had never heard before. I learned a lot, which is accidentally why I'm really enjoying doing this.
Right. And I mean, love Peter Weir movies too, so that was just an added bonus on top of this whole thing. And I really hope he comes to Nashville so we can hang out with him.
Oh man, yes. We got to take Napoleon to get hot chicken, right?
Right, definitely. So I think that's about it today, JT.
I think you're right, man. I think you're right.
It's getting colder. Fall is here. Inching ever closer to Halloween.
It is.
Got some good stuff cooked up for everyone for Halloween.
I think you guys are going to like the Halloween episode a lot.
Yeah, and so we always want to thank Scott Bricklin, Scooby Tunes Music, for letting us use the Jammin' Walk Away, just the epic guitar riff.
I heard from him this week. He said he loved the show.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Is it not?
Oh my gosh. So we're going to interview him eventually about that song.
We've got to.
We owe it to him. We owe it to ourselves.
We do.
And we owe it to you, the listener.
Yeah.
And then we also want to thank Michael Eads. And,
What's he do here?
We own this town. He's our podcast producer, and it's a great podcast network, and there's a lot of great other podcasts. So go to weownthistown.net. And as always, be excellent to each other.
And party on, dudes!
Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at San Dimas Today.
Is that a train?
It is a train, yeah. Our high-class studio does have a train that runs occasionally behind us, so please forgive us.
That's okay.